Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gaming Daddy channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So we're going to be talking Outriders today, and the demo is already here. Everyone that I know so far has had a chance to at least download or even get their hands on it. And from the very first impressions that I've gotten, I believe that Outriders has basically done the one job that I think it had claimed that it was going to do, which is deliver a free demo that everyone could play regardless of a pre-order, and they can try out the demo and keep their progress, because Square Enix did not or has confirmed that they're not going to be removing this demo. So this is different from a beta. There are many good things about this. If you guys remember the last video game that Square Enix basically touched, or Square Enix basically published, that was some sort of multiplayer cooperative game, that was the Avengers game. And the company that was working on that game, basically Crystal Dynamics, and maybe whoever was pulling the shots or calling the pulling the strings or calling the shots, I meant to say, on that front, wanted for the game to actually have just 4 betas. So a closed beta for people who pre-ordered, then another closed beta, then an open beta, and then another open beta. So there were just all these betas everywhere, and it was a little confusing, and there seemed to be time limits on it. This is opening the floodgates for everyone to be able to come in and give their own opinions, or at least check the game out, purchase the game if they like what they see. And then, for those who don't like what they see, they can give it a break and maybe, eventually come around to it later on, down the season or down the release or whatever it is. Now, in my own opinion, I have to basically talk about my initial impressions of this game. Now, I'll go further to give more impressions as I continue to play. It's very important to do this because your initial impressions will mainly differ, or in some instances, there's a small percentage that your impressions will change down the road. So I got to play the demo. I got to play a few hours of it, and my initial impressions are heavily undecided about the game. Now, I say that because there are a lot of mechanics and systems that I've also experienced in other games that did not necessarily hook me or catch me. And one of those games I've played is Gears of War, and that game basically had similar systems here, and Gears of War did not interest me. Now, this is a studio that has worked on a Gears of War game, so you can basically see a lot of similarities and patterns with that design. And so that's basically where this is coming from. But I also don't want to be premature to judge the game based on the similarities, or based on kind of the, I would say the close threads that make it look similar to Gears of War. I would love to judge the game on its own strengths. And those strengths I can't necessarily experience yet until I maybe delve much further into the demo by exploring the other classes, or at the least making a purchase of the game as a content creator, exploring it and talking more about it to the community. But so far as it stands, I don't know, there seems to be a game without a wow factor. And I wasn't expecting a wow factor for the game. I was expecting the game to basically deliver what it wanted to deliver, which is basically a solid gaming experience. And if that is exactly what you want, then I think you're going to enjoy Outriders. Now, the reason I sound like this is not because I don't want to give the game the credit that the game is due. I think I have to be very upfront with you. I'm not necessarily a huge player of shooter games. So for me to pick up a shooter game, there has to be a wow factor. So I'm not saying that because this game doesn't have a wow factor, it's not a good game. Please don't get me wrong. But in order for me to adopt the game, it would have to have a wow factor for me to be able to get into it. And so far, from what I've played, I have not seen anything along the lines of that. And I think one of the really important things that a lot of video games, have to understand is whenever they're going for an audience, they have to be true to themselves. And Outriders seems like it wants to have a strong lore, wants to have a strong story, and it wants to keep its own mechanics core to its own self. So that is exactly what they need to do. Who's going to love the game is going to love the game, and who's not going to love the game is not going to love the game. And I encourage the developers to go ahead and make the game, or at least polish the game that they have, and publish the game in the best possible state that it is, and it will be a success. Now, I know many people in the community, have looked at it under the lens of Destiny or The Division or all these other games. But at the end of the day, there are some who would appreciate it for exactly what it is. And honestly, I am trying my very best to appreciate the game for exactly what it is, which is a game that is trying to bring a story, a lore, and really interesting mechanics to the looter shooter genre from a PvE perspective. So no PvP, just PvE. It looks like it's going to fulfill that niche, and it's going to serve that purpose for players, around. And I'm hoping that even though I may not adopt the game for just itself, that I at least am able to adopt it for the community of gamers at large. See, that's a very big thing as well. I'm not going to just judge the game on say, the environment and all the other things kind of look a certain way, so it doesn't seem like, that wow factor is there to pull me in. There are other things and other factors that could also allow for me to potentially adopt the game. But these factors are going to most likely be more fleshed out and in the full release of the game. Because right now, even if you're going to play the demo, you're going to play the demo with basically the exact same missions and maybe 4 times over. That might be a little bit too much and a little challenging for somebody like me, who already sees a wow factor in another shooter or the only other shooter that I play. In fact, if Outriders will have me adopt another shooter, then they would have done a very decent job with their community setup, which is basically their matchmaking systems. All of those co-op systems and group systems need to be flawless, because that's a very huge attractive factor. That's really the reason a lot of people are playing a lot of the other games, because they have these systems in place. Another thing, too, that I would say my initial impressions is not going to cover yet, because I want to explore it more, is how the progression, the progression system is going to work to a specific extent. And for now, I think the progression is a little interesting. The story, on the other hand, no, it has a lot of cutscenes. I think I don't know what they were trying to achieve with the huge amounts of cutscenes. Maybe they were trying to establish the story, but to be very honest, again, stories to me in a game that really does have a wider, broader community appeal is very hard for me as a sell. If you're going to tell a story, you really need a closed loop for that story. Anything that open ends the story, to me, usually makes it cheap. And that's just me. I'm not saying that this is what the game is. I'm just saying this is how I perceive the game. So if I'm going to play a story-driven game, if I want to experience a good story, I usually find myself in the single-player genre, and I play a lot of single-player games, and many times I enjoy the story along the line. So that's basically what, I think so far. And then my opinion about combat is really, really maybe might differ from a lot of people's enjoyment of the combat. So I'm playing the other shooter that I played, The Division 2. It is a cover-based shooter that really does encourage a lot of cover-based play. And, they have a very decent and solid cover system, and so does Outriders nonetheless. I'm really, impressed. It's not 100% as good as the Division 2's, cover system, but it does a good job. But here's the catch. The game has a mechanic, or is designed with a mechanic, that forces you out of cover and instead wants you to use cover temporarily or as kind of a brief relief in order for you to be able to deal with hordes of enemies. Also, the game removes the possibility for you to, in quote, heal, and the only way you can garner health regeneration of some kind is perhaps maybe with some other skills that, in the skill tree, but primarily one way you can actually do so is actually by taking on enemies and, killing them. So the game actually wants to pull you out of cover in more than one way. Now, to me, I do not like this system. I know many people might might like it, but as a Division agent, yes, we have hard-hitting enemies, and they're designed to keep you in cover. And when they do things that remove you from cover, it's because that's used as a difficulty scaling mechanic rather than the entirety of the mechanic of the game. So we in the Division community are used to just, using cover to basically, overpower, for the most part, the enemy NPCs. Coming here, this is basically the antithesis of that. And that's going to take a little bit for me to adjust to. Now, for some people, I'm starting to see comments from some of you here in the community, and you already love it. You say that system is apparently something that you enjoy. And so I have to adopt. I'm a slow adopter in many things. So it's something that I'm going to have to pretty much, come to terms with and basically understand very well. So that's another very interesting aspect to it. And then when it comes to fluidity and responsiveness, the game does a good job. The game comes out really looking good. I'm really excited, to be very honest. The game is designed on a game engine that I'm basically studying and learning. I've been grinding what it takes to learn how to do game development on the engine that was used to develop this game. So it's really exciting to see that engine once again can bring out polish and a responsive game if you have a team that's behind it that does a good job. I mean, this is the Unreal Engine 4. Now, the Unreal Engine 3 and some of the other older Unreal Engines have dropped some really good games, the Arkham games, and some other really decent games in the past. And then the Unreal Engine 4 more recently was used to design and develop Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. So I'm really excited that this is, from a technical and development perspective, this is something that really does, ring home to me. And so I think that's one of the main reasons I actually will be committing to purchasing the game, because it's a nice kind of a thing that you can look forward to. Like, maybe one day I can understand all the intricacies or most of the intricacies that it takes to deliver, a product like this. And the team at People Can Fly have already been able to basically do that to this particular extent. So this is basically my initial, impressions of the demo so far, from a combat perspective, from some of the technical aspects of the game, from some of the mechanics that I've, basically explored so far. And I'm going to basically just take my time to marinate over this. You see, one of the things that I've learned is that I shouldn't judge a video game on my initial, impressions of it, that I have to always give some time and come back to it to be able to reevaluate it, because sometimes you may just not see some things that may appeal to you. And when you give it a second and a third go, those things may be evident, or more evident than they primarily initially were when you first got your hands on it. A big example is Tom Clancy's The Division 2. I remember playing the beta and not actually playing the game until about April. So I actually waited about 2-3 or almost about 3 weeks after playing the beta for The Division 1 before I actually jumped in. Now here I am. I'm a huge Division fan and basically a cheerleader for the game, not knowing at that time when I first even tried the beta that I would really enjoy the game and what it had to offer and its mechanics. So that learning experience is what I'm trying to bring to looking at Outriders, and I have to be very meticulous and very, very calculated as to how I approach the rest of the game, especially when I'm judging it here in the public square. But at the end of the day, I'm going to leave the conversation here for you guys. Talk to me in the comment section. What do you think? I promise I will not let my own, impressions, or I'm not going to let your impressions spoil mine. I'm going to read it for what it is, your impressions, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to play again, pick maybe another class, and then just, start to enjoy exactly what this game is bringing to the table, if there's anything that I feel I can enjoy anyways. I'll talk to you guys in another video. Thank you very much for your time and audience. Hopefully we'll talk in another one. Peace out.